The federal budget has been talked about a lot recently, especially since there's been a federal government shutdown. So, Freedom Constitution versus President George Washington, the federal budget. On September 29, 1789, President Washington signed into law the first ever federal budget. It was titled, An Act Making Appropriations for the Service of the Present Year. I'm going to read it, so go ahead and double speed if you would like. Section 1. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that there be appropriated for the service of the present year to be paid out of the moneys which arise either from the requisitions heretofore made upon the several states, or from the duties, imposts, and tonnage, the following sums, viz. A sum not exceeding $216,000 for defraying the expenses of the civil list under the late and present government. A sum not exceeding $137,000 for defraying the expenses of the Department of War. A sum not exceeding $190,000 for discharging the warrants issued by the late Board of Treasury and remaining unsatisfied, and a sum not exceeding $96,000 for paying the pension to invalids. That last part about invalids wasn't really about invalids. It was about disabled veterans who had gone to war and could no longer care for themselves, them receiving a pension. So how does this stack up with modern times, or at least the Freedom Constitution? First, let's discuss Treasury warrants. So Treasury warrants were a piece of paper signed by the Secretary of Treasury that they would give an organization or person saying that the government owed them money. So, for instance, the first Treasury warrant was from a bank to the Department of War. It gave the bank gave the Department of War, I think, like $20,000, and the Department of War gave them a Treasury warrant saying that the U.S. government owed them that money back. So if we add up all the government's projected expenses plus paying its debts, it paid around $543,000 in 1789, which is about $20,124,000 in today's money by some estimates. $20 million is significantly less than we spend today, but things have become increasingly complicated, especially around infrastructure. So what does the Freedom Constitution actually say about budgeting? Well, this is covered in Article 11 of the Freedom Constitution. Section 1 specifically says that Congress forfeits 2 days of pay for every 1 day they fail to pass a budget. Section B says that the United States government can only borrow $2.50 for every $10,000 in revenue it collects, and can only spend $5 for every $100,000 in revenue it collects. It says that no defense or warfighting activities may exceed 120% of the budget allocated for domestic healthcare, education, and environmental restoration. So it puts strong limits on how much can be spent toward the military, while also requiring the government to spend money on domestic healthcare, education, and environmental restoration. It requires the government spend $2 to better the lives of United States citizens for every $1 it sends out of the country in foreign aid. It requires $5 be spent on crime prevention and rehabilitation for every $1 spent on confining criminals. So it places a heavy emphasis on preventing criminal activity and helping criminals recover and reintegrate into society instead of keeping them in prison. It requires the government budget to reduce costs incurred by farmers and regulate the cost of food to citizens to amount set by producers, in which falls between the cost to produce food, inclusive of workers' wages, and 3 times the cost to produce food when it is sold domestically, and 5 times when the cost to produce food is sold internationally. That's a little complex, but what it says is it's designed to lower costs for farmers and to keep food prices low, while still letting farmers make a considerable profit. It requires Congress to fund ways to cure illnesses. It requires Congress to fund pathways to education that include mentorships, apprenticeships, institutions that teach trade labors, and traditional schooling. It prohibits the collection of interest on any federal loans. And Section 12 creates an entire tax code to ensure that citizens, non-citizens, and business entities all pull their own weight without being overburdened by taxes. So while the government has become far more complex since 1789, the Freedom Constitution accounts for that. Article 11 defines the budget and what Congress can and cannot spend money on, and how much money it can spend. It even creates the military branches. All this to ensure you have safety without oppression.